They jump over fences. He does parkour off a homeless guy's back. Welcome to Movie Pain or Pleasure podcast, the show where we watch movies and make jokes and complain and determine if they are a hate watch worthy of our ire or they're a guilty pleasure that we can watch over and over again. I'm your co-host, Melanie Gibson.
What's up, fishes? This is AJ Wall.
This is AJ Wall. And what are we talking about today?
Death Note.
Netflix's Death Note.
Not the good one. Not the good one.
No, not the good one. I was going to show my anime box set, but I forgot to bring it in our recording room with me. So this is not the brilliant anime that was released several years ago based on the Japanese manga. It is Netflix's rendition showing that Netflix will make a movie about anything. So I think this is our first true hate watch of the episode. And AJ, can you explain kind of the weird joy in hate watching a movie?
It's very different from a guilty pleasure. Guilty pleasures, you shouldn't like it anyway. Because it's indulgent. Hate watches, you'll dislike it, but you're going to have fun bashing on it, basically. You're being an evil person to a movie.
Mm-hmm. If Emperor Palpatine were sitting here, he'd say, "Good, let the hatred run through you." It's kind of like, okay, you guys, gossiping is bad, but it feels good when you do it. That's what hate watching a movie is like. And I don't think we had very high expectations for this movie. We just thought, oh wow, they made a live-action American adaptation of Death Note, which is one of the most incredible animes of all time.
But
and
still fell below the expectations.
Even below. So expectations weren't high, but I think for me, Death Note was the first anime I ever watched, and so it means a lot to me. It's the most incredible cat and mouse thing I've ever seen. It's really intriguing. And this movie is not. And so pretty early on when we watched it, we knew it was going to be a hate watch. So friends and fans, this will be our hate watch experience of Netflix's Death Note. Why don't you talk a little bit about the director and his vision for this movie?
So we didn't realize there were extras on Netflix. And we noticed there was some about the behind the scenes. They're all about a minute long. And we get to hear Adam Wingard, the director, talk about his, oh yeah, we really wanted to do a darker, grittier, edgier version. This is not darker. This is not grittier. This is just uglier and more like Final Destination porn.
Yeah.
It's weird death and murder and blood. Man, that's way better than psychological intrigue.
Yeah, way better. It looks like bodies look like smashed watermelons with cranberry juice flowing out of them. One of the blurbs, the critics supposedly called it a bloody, beautiful adaptation of the manga.
God,
it's
no,
bloody. It's not beautiful. And they bragged about, oh yeah, we're making it so much darker. Having gore doesn't necessarily make it darker. There's just some fucked up stuff that happens in the anime, some dark, dark, dark shit. I won't say, you just go watch the anime. But yeah, like AJ said, it's a psychological thriller, and this movie is just, it's like trying to be an 80s teen horror movie and a little bit of crime, intrigue, thriller, but it just misses the mark. So
it's so infuriating.
Yeah, and so in spirit...
it's so arrogant. We wanted to make a edgier, darker... You son of a bitch.
The anime's edgy enough. Not that you can't make a movie of Death Note. It's not like it's holy and it shouldn't be untouched, but...
If he wanted to make his own darker, whatever, he could say it however he wants. He could have made a whole new story, and I would be fine. Go ahead. Take the Death Note, adapt it, and, make a sequel, sort of, to the story. But don't use the exact same characters and change everything about them. It's stupid.
Mm-hmm.
You're ruining the original character.
Yeah, it's not respectful of the original source material. So in the spirit of Death Note, we have our own notebooks that we brought that basically were our Death Notes for Death Note. Mine has cute sugar skulls all over it. My mom just got it for me. I know.
Mine's purple.
Yeah, AJ's got a purple one. I'm 42 and I still like presents from my mom. So we're going to be reading from our own Death Note about Death Note. And the first note I have in here about this movie is, in capital letters, fuck this movie.
I don't know what my first statement is. Hold on. I gotta get to it. Nope, that's the second page. I wrote 2 full pages for this whole movie. That's the most so far.
Yeah, but we can just talk through it. So this is a Netflix original movie because Netflix will make anything, but their stock is good, so they've been good to me. So I won't bash Netflix too much. And it takes place in Seattle as opposed to the original, which took place in Japan. So that's cool. That's fine. Putting it in a different setting. There's kind of an emo music opening. And we meet Light Turner. Now, the original character's name was Light Yagami, and he was an evil genius. Which in anime, it's always like, yes, there's this high school student who's a genius and wonderful at everything. So that's not new to anime, but this guy is a true psychological sociopath genius. And meanwhile, Light Turner is just kind of a dorky kid who gets picked on.
He's the homework nerd. He's the nerd you go to. He's not bullied for his homework. He just charges for it.
He does other people's
he's
homework for
separately.
them. So yeah, he's bullied as a separate incident on top of that. So he's the dorky outcast, kind of the dweeby kid. And I'm not even going to say who it's played by because he's not that great. The names I will mention are Lakeith Stanfield plays L, and he's pretty good for what they give him.
He
and
tries.
Yeah, and Willem Dafoe is Ryuk, the death god Shinigami, and he does a good job for what he's given to.
He's
so
perfect.
Those are the only 2 people who are going to get credit because those are the only 2 people who were pretty good in this movie. So anyway, we meet Light, who lives with his father, who's a cop, and his mother is dead, and that has something to do with the deaths later on. So, like in the anime, the Death Note notebook falls from the sky, and of course he's curious and picks it up, and he starts reading all the rules, and this is where it automatically starts diverting from the anime, because in the anime, and probably in the manga too, it's only got a couple of rules at the beginning, and with this one it's got hundreds.
The original had something like 13, somewhere near 12 or 13. And then this one, at least 100, because he mentions like rule 90, blah, 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 whatever. And this is specifically to shortcut showing how smart Light is. Light figured out rules that aren't like legitimate rules. It's just functions that are about the notebook, like how you can kill people. You can't kill people by writing things that are impossible. They decide, oh well, we don't have time to develop him as a smart character, so we'll just write, you can't do this, you have to do this, you can't do that, you can do this. And it contradicts itself.
But it leaves out the most important rule of all, and that is what?
The person who writes their name, a name in this notebook, can neither go to heaven nor to hell. So that's a big indicator of what kind of person Light is.
We're talking about Light Yagami, the original character from the manga.
If that rule was there at all, it would show you how serious he was about what his conviction is.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of character development for Light Turner. I believe he's just a dumb teenager.
He's such a bitch-ass pussy. That's which
his girlfriend calls him a pussy too. So.
that's how I wrote his opening scene.
Yeah, okay, so he's a dorky kid. And so, yeah, it takes away the conviction that Light Yagami in the anime has and the depths that he will go to use the Death Note and protect the Death Note.
And they immediately changed, like, okay, it wasn't good enough that he just himself, as a person who considered himself very hardworking, and he cared about the function of the law because his father was a very high-ranking police officer. I think it's chief of police in the original version. All of that is part of what makes him decide that, the law can't fix everything and attack all the people that deserve it, so he'll do it. In this, it's like, well, that's not good enough. We can't have that nuance. No. His mom has to be murdered by somebody in a cartoonish... not a cartoonish way, but the person who murdered his mom is a cartoon.
Yeah. So this gets us into Light's first death. So they speed through it pretty quickly. Light figures out how the Death Note works. Actually, wait.
No.
His
first one.
His first one. Yeah, let's talk about this. Is the Final Destination death. And this is where we meet my favorite character from the anime, the Death God, or the Shinigami, known as Ryuk. And so Light gets detention for cheating homework, basically. And he also got in a fight, but the principal doesn't care.
That's where he's shown to be a bitch-ass pussy.
Okay, we'll get to... Hang on. Yes, he's a bitch-ass pussy. Let's get to that. So, this isn't for kids here, so don't have your kids listen to this. So, Light gets detention, and he's in a room, and all of a sudden, the lights in the room go out, things fall, it gets
There's
creepy.
marbles.
Marbles, for some reason, fall on the floor.
Yeah.
Creepy and scary, and so he does what any white person in a horror movie does, is looks around and says, hello, instead of getting the hell out of that room, which is what he should have done.
And then he screams like Ned Flanders.
He screams like, like a, I don't want to say like a girl because that's demeaning to women
like Ned
girls,
Flanders.
but yeah, but like Ned Flanders when the plant died. And Ryuk shows up. And if you haven't seen it, he is a pretty big, scary-looking character.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He would be terrifying.
And I will say, for this one, they did either the makeup, the CGI, whatever, that looked pretty good.
They kept him in the dark. It was smart. They didn't, like, put him right up front where you could see his face. Like, you saw everything a couple times when he's laughing, but it's always in shadow.
Yeah, and Willem Dafoe does the voice. So it's basically the Green Goblin from Spider-Man.
Oh, yeah. He's like...
But Willem Dafoe's awesome.
In his... another little short, it had him explain for, like, 10 seconds, like, what he was doing when he... It sounded like they cut out a bunch of it. I wish they would let him talk more. But he's like, God, I saw the designs from the manga, and I decided how I would base his voice. It's the Green Goblin, which is fine. The Green Goblin's over the top and perfect for that.
And Willem Dafoe does a fine job with what he's given, but they don't give him much to do besides just kind of shit-talking Light and cackling.
And he's bloodthirsty as all hell.
Yeah, and they also do some fan service of close-ups on apples a couple of times in the beginning. And
they fan service a lot of things because they didn't try.
It doesn't work because they do close-ups on apples, and if you know the anime, Ryuk loves apples from the human world. He comes from a world that is neither heaven nor hell. It's not limbo, it's not anything like that, but it's the world of the death gods, the Shinigami, who see people's lifespan, they control their deaths, things like that. So it's kind of this awful, gross purgatory, and the apples there are really bad. Yeah. And so Ryuk is hilarious in the anime. It's like the Joker in a big, scary demon costume. And he has this thing for human apples, and it's just a running joke throughout the anime. And they do it in the movie where you'll see an apple core fly out, like, oh, Ryuk just ate an apple.
And there's so much apple still left on that.
But they never... Yeah,
he would eat that whole thing. He kind of
nibbles at it. But they fall short of what they're trying to do for the fans who know the anime is Ryuk talk about his weird fetish for human world apples.
It's exactly like that moment in, I hate to bring this up, Twilight, when he kicks that apple up and he holds it just like the book cover.
Yeah, like, hey,
it's
fans.
Like, look. See? It's the thing you like.
Yeah, so I was like,
dumbass.
Hey, you like Ryuk? You got apples in this movie. Great. So this is where, again, I don't want to go too much saying this is what happened in the anime and this is what happened in the anime, but the movie just misses the marks on things. Yeah, you can, if you want to do it a little bit in different interpretation, that's fine. But again, they don't develop Light into really wanting to commit to the Death Note because Ryuk basically goads him into using it, which he does not do. I mean, he just drops the book because he's bored and he wants to see what a human will do with it.
Well, if it's because Light thinks it's a dream, because that makes sense. There's a giant monster.
Yeah, there's a giant demon.
And he's like, well, if it's a dream, it doesn't matter anyway. So let's test out this dream and write that kid's name. And he writes the bully's name that punched him in the beginning, and he's like, well, what about how he's gonna die? And he's like, oh, decapitation.
Which is pretty aggressive for...
the first death.
Yeah, the first death.
I mean, okay, teenager in 2015 or whatever year this is supposed to take care, I guess. Like, I don't know.
I guess they see enough of that gross stuff. They're
and it literally looks exactly like a Final Destination scene. It's filmed just like it. It's really It's
Yeah.
not just that the subject matter is the same. All the deaths, they really look like they were specifically trying to emulate Final Destination.
Because it's kind of this Rube Goldberg-esque series of events that leads to, a woman drops her groceries, a kid chases a ball into the street, a truck swerves, and a ladder on top of the truck comes loose and slices the guy's head off, and it just falls like a melon onto the sidewalk. And then I started thinking, and it happens with a few other deaths where someone gets hit by a truck, and so innocent people get co-opted into killing somebody.
There's so many people.
So there are no ramifications for the innocent people who accidentally cause these deaths. Like the man driving the truck is probably going to get sued by the family of this kid, and his life is ruined, all because some dumbass teenager wrote that this bully's going to be decapitated.
If I had to take a guess, so the correct rules, since there's so many rules, the correct rules of the book is not, as they later say in the movie, dealer's choice. It's supposed to be heart attack.
That's the default.
That is default. You write somebody's name, heart attack. My guess, this is just a fan theory, but not a fan theory, headcanon, is that the people from Netflix, they heard all the jokes that were made about the people who died in the live action movies in Japan, about how silly it looked. It did look very silly. When everyone died of heart attacks, they all like foam in the mouth and they have a seizure.
Is there
it
ever
looks
a
terrible,
good, yeah,
but
as do all
still,
live action anime adaptations.
Just don't do the weird foamy eye roll thing. That's my guess. They're like, well, we can't just do that because people made fun of that. So we're gonna go with this, and we're gonna show how terrible death is by making it gruesome.
Yeah, gruesome death. So that takes us to another gruesome death. So Light is still screaming and freaked out. Ryuk says, look, okay, you can do this or not. If you don't want to do it, leave it alone for 7 days, because 7 days is always the magical number in everything. And I'll find it a new owner, which humans are not meant to use the death note. The death gods like Ryuk use them themselves. But the way it comes off in the movie is Ryuk is just kind of a vehicle for the death note rather than really...
They entirely changed Shinigami lore, and then the character Ryuk was awesome because he looks like this giant demon monster, and he doesn't give a shit about anything.
Yeah, he's really funny.
Bored. He doesn't push agendas. He barely even helps Light. The only time he even gives a shit about helping somebody is when Light's like, well, people are watching me, and if you don't help me, I can't get you apples.
Yeah, so that brings it back to the apples, Ryuk and his apples.
And then he helps. So Ryuk is kind of just a lazy, bored asshole. He's not bloodthirsty.
He looks, I wrote down, he looks scary, but he's also boring. And Willem Dafoe does a really good job with what little they give him to do.
It's just the writing.
Ryuk. It's the writing, it's lazy writing. So, Willem Dafoe does a fine job. He's perfect for the voice of Ryuk. Yeah. But they just don't give him enough to do for this really fantastic dynamic character. So Light's interested now in the Death Note, and so he decides, we've established when he talks with his cop father a little bit, that they're still getting over his mother's death. His mother had been hit by a car, and the guy who killed her was acquitted of manslaughter.
He's like, Dad, you're a pussy.
And yeah, he says some really disrespectful things to his dad, and so Light goes up and tries out the Death Note on this guy who's a cartoonish mobstery looking guy, and the guy's eating in a restaurant. And again, this is another one of those Final Destination murder porn gross out type of deaths where it also involves an innocent person who would be held liable if this were a real thing.
Totally getting
so the waiter the waiter trips on a salt shaker that had been knocked off the table, and he kind of bumps the guy that had run over Light's mom, and he impales himself.
I guess is like holding his steak knife.
Must be holding it straight up because he impales himself in the throat on his knife, and blood spurts out all over the table. And it's kind of weird that the juxtaposition of the gore doesn't quite work, because there really aren't a whole lot of deaths, but when they have them, they're really gross and bloody. And it almost doesn't fit the aesthetic of the movie, which honestly is okay. But it's really over the top. So Light discovers that it works, and this is an hour and a half movie, so they speed everything up, and so he decides pretty quickly he's going to kill bad guys.
Yeah.
And also, what happens pretty quickly is he gets himself a girlfriend.
Yeah, it's the very next scene. He's just at school.
Next scene.
And he's, this kid who was based on a genius in the original. Sorry, talking about the original again, but if you're going to change the story, don't use the same characters.
The original anime is on Netflix, so
totally
you go watch that.
Watch it.
Yeah.
But so he's such a jackass. He sits in the middle of an auditorium with a basketball practice going on with a notebook. Not even like flat, where you can't see the title of it, just like this, where you could read on the side.
It says Death Note. It says Death Note on the side.
And then Mia, not Misa.
Misa.
Which is such a big change. They should have just called her Misa. It's so stupid. Misa wouldn't have been noticeable. But, so she comes in, and immediately he's like, you want to know something? I have a Death Note.
That's it. That's all that really happens. And she's basically discount Kristen Stewart. Like, she's a cheerleader, but she's not one of the hot blonde girls. She's kind of dark and edgy and tough.
And they don't give any reason. Like, he talks to her like she's got this weird past like him, but they never explain family death.
It happens... Everything happens really quickly, and so I guess Light really wanted a girlfriend. He's a teenage boy, so a girl's interested in him, and immediately he's like, hey, you want to know something? I got a book that kills people. And so they go to the computer lab, and there's a weird line. You, of all people, would be interested in this.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean anything.
Of all people. Now, we talked about this. If she had a backstory, like, let's say she had a relative who was abusing her, or a boyfriend who was beating her up or something, and he wanted to prove it and like, hey, I'm going to kill this person who's hurting you, and then she gets all in, that would make sense. It would still be very extreme, but again, having a book that kills people is extreme too.
Or, like in the original version, where Misa originally is obsessed with Kira, Light, because he's already known to the world, and she thinks he killed... I can't remember exactly, either the person who was stalking her and tried to kill her, or someone who hurt somebody else in her family, something like that. He did something that directly impacted her life. In this, he's just like, hey...
He just meets a girl who's hot for murder.
And then murder sex, just over and over, like, how many can we kill?
So wait, let's talk about the what they see is the first death caused by Kira, and we'll explain Kira in a moment. So there's a guy named James Brody who is holding some people hostage. So they're Light and Mia are live streaming the news in the computer lab. His name is James Brody, and so he said, "Look, I'm going to show you what happens." Now, they didn't really do this much in the anime, but in this movie version, you can control a lot of people's actions before they die. The purpose of the Death Note is to write down the name of the person and then they die.
They can do that in the original, but they don't like make this big... There's a bunch of rules around it.
A bunch of things that happen. It's very minimal. But in this one, he says, okay, he's going to let the hostages out. He's going to do a military salute to the cops. And a truck is going to hit him. Now, the truck, this is another ridiculous Final Destination looking thing. The SWAT truck, which I don't know why it would be going right through the middle of this crime scene, but whatever. It's in the middle of the street. It looks like it's going maybe 20 miles an hour.
Oh yeah, it's not very fast.
But when it bumps into this guy, his body basically explodes.
He's a water balloon.
Yeah, he's a
walking
water balloon filled with red food dye, and there's blood and squishy guts everywhere. And immediately Mia's like, let's kill people. So she has a thirst for murder more than anybody else in this. And so this is where they're trying to kind of follow the anime. So in the original anime, Light Yagami has this conviction that he is going to take out criminals, which is a good intent. Like, if you decide to use the Death Note, that's already
he specifically starts with violent criminals and, like, drug lord, anybody that's in the public sphere that he has knowledge of.
But let's still say, but Light Yagami it still comes from an arrogant, sociopathic...
Yeah, but at least he has a standard.
Yeah, but he does like that he's seen as a god, and that's what Light and Mia get into. So they'll look up, say, war criminals and FBI, 10 most wanted and such, because the rule is you have to have the person's face in your mind. You can't just hear a name and write it down. You have to have the person's face in your mind and write it down, which is, I think, a rule from the original anime as well. And so they go on this basically natural born killers, hot young couple killing spree, and he's probably happy because he's getting bad teenage sex from Mia, and they were just both gross, and so she's into it more than he is, and so this is again something that's really rushed. He comes in and says, "Hey, let's call this being that's killing everybody Kira, because Kira is a Russian and Celtic word for light, which is my name."
Which are two different languages.
Two very different. Okay, first of all, light does not translate into Kira in Russian or Celtic. I looked them up, I can't pronounce them, but it's very different words. Those aren't the words.
And then he does like a little nudge, another little look, the anime happen moment, or the manga, where he's like, it also kinda means something different. It also kinda means killer in Japanese. It does not mean killer in Japanese. Kira in Japanese means glittery. Shiny.
I want to be Kira.
I think it's actually Kira, but still.
Kira.
Kira is a like colloquialization, however, transliteration of killer in English. Like if you were to create an English word and make it into Japanese vowels and pronunciation, it would become Kira. That's what it did come from the manga, but the way he explains it, it's one, if everything he said was true, that's like 3 way too specific things that I feel like L, who we're gonna get to very soon, would pick up on immediately.
Yeah,
and be like, well, there he is.
Yeah, if I'm going, okay, I've already established that I'm a monster of a human being, because if given the chance to use the Death Note, I would. But I wouldn't, and if I were to become kind of seen as an all-knowing death god who punishes the wicked, I wouldn't do some kind of a spin on the name Melanie, like, ha ha ha, it's my initials upside down or whatever. No, I wouldn't.
You could just be the darkness.
Because my name means darkness, and then Elle would catch me.
The darkness has come.
And then they're like, wait, Melanie is derived from...
That would be a little bit harder to figure out, actually.
Not for Elle. Elle's our friend detective. So anyway, but they rushed that, and he's wearing an Elle t-shirt for those of you who can't see. So again, they rush this thing of dumbass light running, and we're gonna call ourselves Kira. And so then there's a montage of them writing down names and killing people, and all these bloody, gory deaths happening around the world. And people start to pick up on it and start kind of worshiping this being called Kira, because
they didn't really do anything with. They did one scene later
that comes back at the end.
Yeah.
With Elle, and we'll get there. There's this reverence toward this all-seeing being called Kira, and so then this is where the police get involved, because basically they're calling bullshit, like, no, this is not some kind of god who is punishing the wicked. There's a human being behind this, and we're gonna catch him.
Well, some of the cops.
Kind of,
like,
yeah.
His dad is into catching Kira, and some of the other cops are like,
I don't know, he's doing our job for
us.
They
trash his office. Anyway, but then this is where Elle is like presented, and...
Just explain who Elle is from the anime, and then we'll get into how he's represented in the movie.
Oh, so, okay. I'm trying to think. If you raised a child from like 6 years old to grow up and be the greatest detective in the world with total ambiguity, nobody knows who he is, that's Elle, pretty much. He's literally, the original character at least, is literally the top 3 detectives in the world, because he actually has aliases set up just to confuse other people with who he really is. And he even detects himself. Like he's so he's a little bit on like the spectrum, sort of. He's awkward, he doesn't act normal, he's always hunched, he has character traits where he's very into sugar, things like that.
Yeah, and
In this, it's they like try to force it like this is specifically his system, and like in the anime maybe it has some sort of bearing on him, but they don't go like this is why he's so good at what he does. This is how he does. You have to do this to be a good detective. No, because that would be stupid, and I wouldn't give a shit.
yeah, and Elle is
But-
portrayed by Lakeith Stanfield, and
And
I
he does a good job.
really hated it the first time I saw it, and the second time around, I appreciated Lakeith's performance a little bit more. He, as an actor, did a
Yeah.
good job with what he had available to
He
him.
seemed like he actually knew about the anime or maybe the manga, and
He tried.
tried to
Yeah.
behave correctly and do the body language, and someone around him definitely bothered with that part, but he's still written terribly. So he comes in,
Yeah.
we see there's a club murder in Japan, and the entire club is full of dead people, including probably just women who were I don't know, prostitutes or
Yeah.
sex slaves. Poor them, because they didn't do any
Well,
violent crime.
and so Kira, i.e. Light, and his weird Kristen Stewart girlfriend had to have gotten the names of all these people. I mean, it's like 40 people who were brutally murdered, and then it's
Yeah.
written "Justice for Kira" or "Justice of Kira"
So-
written in blood on the wall, and that doesn't make sense
Well-
because some of those people were probably innocent people.
Yeah.
How could they all be criminals?
So you can't kill somebody with a death note unless you have their name. So that's a thing. Which the movie is very, a couple times it's very loose with it. But anyway, so they do have a line where we kind of find out Elle leaked these names. They were kind of underground criminals, like they weren't public knowledge, because he wanted to see if the Kira was actually Japanese, because he was somehow able to figure out that Kira is Japanese and not the Celtic Russian thing. And he started with Japan, he let go these names, and lo and behold, they all died. So now he's like, aha, this person can't be from Japan because they only knew about it when I leaked the info out into the world.
Mm-hmm.
Which is sort of, it's not exactly what Elle really would have done. Real Elle does use a trap using a death row inmate in the original manga and anime. So he is willing to kind of do very gray actions where they're questionable, but he uses people that are definitely on death row. Like whenever he has the fake newscast where Elle comes out as Elle Taylor, whatever it was. So he fakes a light out by doing that in
This
his
is
own
in the
region.
anime.
In the
right?
anime.
Yeah, in the anime.
So that's a little questionable. This is way worse. This is so much worse, because
Yeah.
that means that all those women who were probably only there on like prostitution charges or something all got to die too.
Yeah, and in a really bloody, gruesome way. So they fast track Elle too, because he figures out pretty quickly
Seattle.
that Kira is in Seattle because of supposedly there were local newscasts where he leaked it. Now, how are Light and Mia getting all this information? Well, somehow they hack into the Seattle Police Department, or somehow he gets his dad's access to it. And which also in the anime, that's kind of the same thing. Is Light's father is the police chief, and so he has access to all of these things. So he figures out pretty quickly that he's in on it, and his father wants to catch Kira, but then he starts getting skittery when Elle questions his dad. So then Elle puts detail, basically. He has the FBI following all the suspects, which includes
Because obviously.
because yeah, of course, if the call's coming from inside the house, you're going to check and see what's going on. So he investigates everybody in the Seattle Police Department.
It's still pretty awkward that he picked Light's dad to be involved. He doesn't have... Okay, so he doesn't have a task force. It's just him, Watari, who, by the way, shows his face the entire time in public.
Watari is Elle's handler.
Yes, his yeah, I guess he's his Alfred.
Yeah, he's his Alfred.
He's not his minion, but he kind of is. Like, he'll do everything that L tells him to because L leads the charge, but he's also sort of like a parental-ish person.
Yeah, kind of a caregiver.
The infuriating part that now that I mentioned Audrey,
there's one?
before he gets to Seattle, he walks out of that crime scene and he gets in a limo, which I don't know why someone trying to hide their identity would get in the most obvious vehicle anywhere in town.
The only detective with access to a limo is Batman.
I'm
going
to ride a limo to a crime scene. So,
yeah,
so that's stupid.
Way to be conspicuous.
But he gets in, and then you hear Watari going like, "How many hours have you slept? Has it been since you slept? You need sleep to have good thoughts, or whatever. Here, take the candy." And he's like basically tells L, this isn't L's quirk. He tells him, "Here, eat candy," and he starts telling him when the insulin hits your system and hits your brain, your function, da da da. And he gives him some. I don't give a shit how it works.
We don't
I don't
need that.
care.
You. It could have just been in an anime. It's just a character quirk that he loves sugar, and so he's always got sweets stacked up. He loves sugar, and it's just a thing that he does. It doesn't make him the insulin spike. Doesn't. It's not like Popeye eating spinach.
It's not.
It's not magical.
It's not like
the Death Note is magical.
L being a special mind, and he's the best of the best. It's like they sort of found out how to force him to be the best, and that is through candy, which is really stupid. I'm sorry. I know it was a trait of his, and it's fine as a trait. It's a weird quirk.
Some people have a sweet
There's
tooth.
a funny joke about how people are like, "How are you not fat?" And he's like, "Well, you can burn calories by using your brain." Like, those are kind of silly, and he might just be fucking with people, honestly, in the original source when he says things like that. But that's not the reason he's the best detective in the world. He eats candy. That's how he does it.
Well, he eats candy. I mean, if candy made you smart, I'd be a lot smarter than I am now. So let's get back to El's involvement.
So he gets to Seattle.
He gets to Seattle, and he
picks out Light's dad for no reason. He's not like a special detective.
And he thinks Light is particularly bright. I'm like, is he just good at calculus?
He's not even...
He's good at math.
In the original, he was. In this one, no. He's a moron.
So he puts a tail on him, and this is where Mia gets pretty bloodthirsty because
stupid.
Yeah, and stupid. So we see all the FBI agents. One guy has a heart attack, but then the rest of them die.
Jumping off a building.
Yeah, these bloody deaths, and of course we see the body splat on the ground. And Light starts to get upset because he didn't do it, and he thinks that Ryuk did it because he thinks that Ryuk is pulling the strings the whole time, and that's kind of what they portray in the movie, which is not how it works.
And Ryuk goes along with the accusation.
He messes with him. Yeah, he messes with him.
Although, and then we get the line which doesn't make any sense, where Light basically bows up to Ryuk's like, "I'll write your name in there," which his name is in the Death Note.
Somebody had already written "Don't trust Ryuk,"
which his name is in there. That would mean that he would die of a heart attack. That's the default. If your name is in it, the face is there, you die. That's the rule.
But they don't even remember that they did that.
They don't work on a Shinigami. That's why you can't do it. But instead, Ryuk's like, no one's ever gotten past the first 2 letters. Which, I guess, maybe Death Gods only have one name. I don't know. That's weird. But that
was something that could have been kind of interesting. Like, what happened to the people who tried to kill Ryuk? And the movie didn't pursue that at all because they gave him nothing to do.
So I think that was a bullshit line. I think that was him just
messing with Light.
Yeah, messing with him. Mm-hmm. Because it doesn't make any sense if it was legitimate. His name is in there.
So Light goes on thinking he's starting to get cold feet. He doesn't really want to do this Death Note thing anymore. It's starting to spin out of control. And he knows he's under police investigation, and this scene is kind of funny, even though it's not meant to be. So he's in a cafe one night, and L, Lakeith Stanfield, in his black ninja costume with his mask over his face, which these days is pretty normal. He leaps into the chair and sits the way L does in the anime with his knees up.
Which I appreciate that he's doing the physical things, but L wasn't. They do it so much that it's kind of annoying. Like
it's too much.
There's no other character traits. They don't.
He sits
They-
in a
they
funny
just-
way and he eats sugar.
It's like
That's
the
it.
apples.
Yeah.
Look, cause the anime. Look, cause the manga. But in those versions, they did have a cafe conversation, and he sat not normal, but he didn't sit with his feet up on the thing.
Yeah, he knew how to behave in public. So this is basically, again, the movie really rushing things. Basically, he says, "I gotcha, you're Kira," and Elle's like, "Well, what if I'm not Kira? What if
Light.
somebody else?" Or yeah, sorry.
Light's just like, yeah, I am, but maybe I'm a pawn.
Maybe somebody bigger, and
Like,
so
okay, so you just admitted it.
just admitted it.
Handcuffs. But no.
But no, because Elle says, and it's confusing when we have Elle and Light. So Elle, the detective, played by Lakeith Stanfield, says, "I don't do check. I only do checkmate.
Which is stupid. That's how you get checkmate, is you arrest people and
Get
you
a
investigate
warrant
them.
to search his backpack and his belongings, and
Which they do, but we
Too
didn't
little, too
find
late.
the Death Note
So-
because Misa took it. But wouldn't they investigate accomplices?
yeah, so Mia's playing games, and so now the mission that Light and his girlfriend are on is to kill Elle, is to get Elle's real name and kill him. So they do it by zombie controlling Wataru, his handler.
Which is breaking all the rules. So, okay, they say you can control someone for 2 days. They're very specific with these extra rules that don't exist in the real version. That you can control someone for up to 2 days before they die. But why, if Elle knows from the very beginning, that's why he's covering his face, that you need a name and a face. Why would Wataru, if that was his real name and that was his only name, why would he be walking around with his face out on TV?
Yeah,
This
so
is stupid.
they just overlooked that.
They
it's
had to
probably-
write it so stupid because Light is a moron. He writes Wataru does this. Wataru's not a full name. You need a full name. And you need his real name, which I think would not be his real fucking name.
So we find out that Elle was an orphan, and here's how he became a detective. They put all these little children in a sensory deprivation tank or something.
For like days.
And whichever child didn't come out insane, they're going to raise to be a detective. What happened to the kids who went insane? What kind of monster school? And this is in the United States, which
they are now
Yeah.
Batman characters.
they're Batman characters. And so they say, okay, Walter, you have to go to this old orphanage and look in the records to discover his real name. And so Walter is sort of under the Death Note zombie control. He's like, yes, totally, I'll do that. So he goes, and this is a movie thing that I hate, where they go to an old orphanage or a mental hospital or an old hospital that's been abandoned for decades, and yet
Yes.
somehow the records are always
All
magically
intact.
there. They're all intact.
Not eaten by rats. Or
Not
anything.
eaten by rats or moths or not water damaged. The hospital where I was born has been razed to the ground and rebuilt into, I think, a rehab hospital. So if somebody wanted to go, find my nefarious past or something, good luck to that. The records were probably destroyed. So I hate that. Even Silence of the Lambs does that, where Clarice goes into an old hospital to find records, and those just happen to be intact. So Watry is looking through the files, and there's a ticking clock. And so the thing is also, this is where Light tries to have a little bit of a conscience. He doesn't tell Watry this, but you can destroy the page with a person's name and they won't die. And this is a one-time thing. You only get to save one person. So he thinks once he gets Elle's real name, he will spare Watry so he can kill Elle.
He did this not knowing that you could only get one shot.
You
and
only
then
get one shot.
Ryuka's like, just so you know, you only get one of those. And then he's like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll still do it.
And then he discovers...
But the page is gone.
The page is gone, which by this point we figure it's Mia because she is bloodthirsty. She likes this Death Note. And so people just storm into the hospital
These
or the
people
orphanage.
They're not explained.
Yeah, some guys with guns show up like, are you Watry? He's like, yes. Blam!
Which
and so then they start blasting.
That's another
and he's dead.
Why would he stop? They kill him before he can give
He doesn't give Elle's name.
Elle's name. So I don't understand. People come in and he stops doing what he's doing, even though so far he has specifically not listened to, like, not stopped doing what he was told to do in the Death Note at all. Like, Light even said, well, get out of there. And he's like, no, I have to do it. But then when people walk in, he's like, I will stop looking and talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
Which, these people aren't explained. We don't know who they are. If they... Okay, you can't control people that aren't written in the Death Note. So you can't say Wataru was murdered in a hail of gunfire by FBI agents. You might be able to say that he caught a stray bullet or something. Mm-hmm. Something that was happening anyway, and then he accidentally, air quotes, gets involved in. You can't control people that aren't in the Death Note.
This is where in this movie they co-opt people into killing other people basically under no control. Like the guy at the beginning with the ladder on his truck. That guy's life is ruined.
Like, theoretically, that one could be chalked up to that was going to happen, and then
he just happened to be standing there in the ladder's path.
Writing his name in the book forced him to be in that situation where he was going to die. Because in the original, there is a death that is someone getting hit by a truck, but he rides his motorcycle in front of the truck. Not like goes blank and does it on purpose exactly, but he still actively does something that puts him in harm's way. Mm-hmm. I don't think that the Death Note actively made that truck happen, you know?
Yeah,
so they break their own rules like 20 times.
A bunch of times, and then Light and Mia are just screaming at each other, and I guess if we're gonna have a moral for this one is women weaken legs. Because this poor dumb boy who does not... What about Elle? What about him?
This is... all this time we forgot to talk about Elle freaking out as soon as Wataru goes missing.
Really breaking character. So, again, Lakeith Stanfield's just doing his best, doing whatever he's given for this character, but it really goes against... the character of Elle is that he starts losing his shit and panicking and getting upset and throwing stuff.
Any smart things like where could Wataru be going? Which maybe those people that shot Wataru are the people that he sent to see if Wataru was at the records place, but I don't think he ever said that.
No, he gets very emotional, and so for the rest of the movie, he just acts from a place. He reacts, and he's very emotional, which is so unlike the character of Elle, who never lost his cool. He loses his cool once when he sees a death god, which we will all
Which is more about breaking his sense of reality
He's just
than anything.
really scared. So, but in this movie, he starts, and this is, I think, where I really hated it the first time I watched it, because he just screamed and cried and was so unlike Elle. And now I didn't want to say, oh, it's not like the anime. They're trying to do their own thing. Even if they're trying to do their own thing, this still kind of goes against the personality that they set up in the beginning, where he's very calm and collected and very measured in the way he speaks, even in the face of tragedy and horrible events going on. No, he just loses his shit and screams and cries for the rest of the movie. So we get to, I guess, the climax of the movie. There's a school dance going on, and this is where they kind of lean into the 1980s aesthetic. They're playing Take My Breath Away, and
it's so bad.
I think they're just trying to cater to people like me who grew up in the 80s.
It's so bad.
And so she really wants to be the owner of the book. Starts threatening him.
Which he totally couldn't figure out, even though we knew the whole time.
Yeah, we knew the whole time.
Like, pussy, you can't do this. Why won't you just murder your own father? We didn't mention that. She immediately tried to kill his dad because his dad was at a press conference like, we're going to catch Kira. And she's like, okay, well, we got to kill him. He called us out. Like, what? What? Like, the whole function of Light getting started was someone killed my mom. I want revenge. Other people want revenge and retribution, so I should help them with it. So I'm killing people. But if she kills his dad with a death note, he has to kill her.
Yeah, and so this is where there's a little bit of backwards exposition showing what she did. So they go to a locker room or something to speak privately, and she's like, yeah, I totally killed all the FBI agents, and here's how. So she had stolen a page from the Death Note. She tasers an FBI guy, looks at his picture, so she has his picture and his name, and writes in the Death Note that he will write all the names for her, basically, then they will all die. Which that kind of happens in the anime.
yeah.
Light tricks somebody into writing down all the names so all the agents die.
This is the biggest part that's awful in general about the characters and the writing, is that it's not just the function, because we get to the same thing, but in the original,
Sorry, we're weebing out, guys.
Light as a character is very good at controlling people just through his personality, and he convinces people to do things that end in their own death, giving him info. Or so this particular situation, he kills the FBI agents because he's way more interesting in the other versions instead of just this whiny little bitch boy. He convinces Ray Penber, the FBI agent that's following him, to write down the names of the other FBI agents, because he tells Ray that I'm watching you and I know who you are. I'm going to kill whoever, whatever. Write down their names. And he thinks he's writing them down on a normal piece of paper, and he's actually writing them in the Death Note paper, which was placed underneath his seat
you
at
can
the
tear
subway.
out pages and they still work, which they do in the movie and the anime.
That makes more sense. Light doesn't have all those names. You can't just write that someone else will write everyone they know and do that.
Yeah, so what AJ is saying is through his pure sociopathic, arrogant, egotistical manner of doing things, like Yagami in the anime is able to just convince this guy.
Yeah.
Whereas Mia had to force and zombie control the FBI agent to basically write everybody else into their doom.
Yeah, it's just...
And so Light's freaking out, and he's like, this
dumb.
is too much. I don't want to do this anymore. The cops start looking for Light, and here's the big climax chase scene where he runs from the school. Meanwhile, L is so upset over Watari's death, he smashes things. He opens a briefcase with this...
He has a giant, those giant silver briefcases they have for millions of dollars in movies. And in the middle is just this one little pistol.
And it's a weird looking gun. I don't know much about guns, even though I'm a Texan. I don't know much, but it looks very weird.
It looks like a sci-fi gun.
Yeah, it looks like a sci-fi or a video game gun or something. So he goes on, he's smashing the cop car into everything, and he corners L in an alley. Also they jump over fences. He does parkour off a homeless guy's back. Basically, because he's trying to jump over the fence, and he kind of kick jumps off of this poor homeless guy who's just chilling, minding his own business.
I know I'm on PCP, but that sumbitch just
run
off my back.
Run off my back? So L doesn't care. He smashes into people, destroys property, and so
he smashes that dude's face in a bowl of soup.
Yes, he runs through a restaurant and just steps on a guy's head and smashes him into soup. Which this so goes off of what L, the character, would do.
L didn't get involved physically that way.
No, he was not like a go arrest the guy type of police officer. He was the investigator.
The big moment where they at some point actually have a suspect in the anime and the manga, he controls the situation from a helicopter. He doesn't get down there and
he is not an arresting officer. So this guy, Lakeith Stanfield's version is just completely going off of emotion. So he's got him at gunpoint. And they're in the back of a restaurant. So a guy working in the restaurant opens the door to take out the trash or something, and this is so dumb. Even for this movie, this is dumb. He says, stay where you are. This man is Kira. I am going to arrest him. And then, bam, he gets bashed in the back of the head because the guy at the restaurant
is a supporter.
Is a Kira supporter. So many things wrong with that.
Okay, I know we said L is weird and he's socially awkward and he doesn't know how to act. But he does understand other people. He understands how other people act and feel. So the real L, a good version of L, would know this might be a person who would support Kira.
Yeah, he wouldn't just give away.
He doesn't know off the top of his head. He knows people are very wishy-washy back and forth. Who knows which one? He would probably, if real L was holding Light at gunpoint, he would probably call him a murder suspect. Or something like that. Something...
I mean, under the law, that's all he is at this point.
Something in specific.
He is a suspect.
And then, if anything, that would put people who are against Kira and people who are for Kira on his side, because they would think, oh, he's a murderer. let's get him in custody and then Kira will take care of him because we believe in Kira. That would make a lot of sense.
But okay, first of all, I mean, I'm not a cop. I've never been a cop. We don't have cops in my family or anything. But wouldn't you think if there's a crime scene or if there's an arrest situation happening and just a pedestrian, a stand or bystander walked in, wouldn't the cop tell them, if anything, they'd be like, get out of here. Go back inside.
Go back inside.
They're not going to just say, well, don't move unless maybe they have a weapon too or something. And then tell exactly, well, Melanie, you see, we have this guy here who's suspected of being AJ, the serial killer. And so, no, you don't do that. But he does because he's an idiot. And so he gets knocked out and Light gets away. And he runs to this fairground on a pier. It's basically like Coney Island. There's a big Ferris wheel and games and stuff, a carnival out on a pier. And that's where Mia had wanted to meet him. And so he had taken Elle's gun and he holds the guy at the Ferris wheel at gunpoint and says, take us to the top, because if you're on the run, of course, what are you going to do? Corner yourself on a Ferris wheel.
Yeah.
So they go to the top of the Ferris wheel and they just scream and cry like the dumb teenagers they are.
Don't you love me? Yes, I love you. No, you don't.
Yeah, and so Mia's just the whole time, give me my fucking book! And so this is where he does some conditional things with the Death Note.
This doesn't work. You can't make a conditional. Now, either one of two things happens. Either Light wrote what Mia would do in the Death Note and was hoping she wouldn't actively do it, which means nothing. That's impossible. Because when they actually show the page later, it looks like he just says Mia will take the Death Note and then proceeds to die and things.
In a very specific way. Yeah.
But, so either he thought that as long as she doesn't take it, as long as she resists the urge to take it, it won't work on her, and then I don't know what the rest of the plan would be if she didn't do it, but okay, so if that's it, he's a moron. He already wrote what she was going to do. Watari couldn't change what he was going to do based on what he wants, so why could she? Or, if he wrote it as a conditional is not an option. Their name is in the book, they die. There is no, well, if they do what I say, they die. If they don't do what I say, they don't die. That's not in there.
But that's
not allowed at all. This is so stupid. It breaks its own rules so many fucking times. So, that's not a thing. But fine, so she takes the book because obviously she takes the book. Of course
she does. And
she's a bitch and everybody knows it except for him.
So what would the condition is because he wants to give it up. He's had enough. He wants to throw away the book, start over. And so,
sort of.
So if she says, yes, she wants the Death Note and she wants to keep killing, she will die. And he said, but I hoped you would say no because you love me.
And then she's like, you wrote my name in the book?
And so they just...
Bitch.
But also we find out she wrote his name in the book.
He calls that out too. Yeah. He's like, you wrote my name in the book. I was mad.
So they just have this teenage fight and they yell and scream. So she wrote in the Death Note, Light Turner's heart will stop beating at midnight. But she's beaten at her own game because I guess she chose wrong, and now she is going to die in a very specific way. We find out because Light had written all of it in detail.
This is all shown technically at the end, even though we're talking about. So maybe we'll pause on that. We'll just keep going with what happens.
That's what I'm doing.
I'm just saying, like, we won't explain every piece until we get to the end.
Yeah.
Because the end is when he explains it. The end is supposed to be the saving grace of Light as a genius.
So let me just get to the Ferris wheel part, and then you do the ending. So they fall off the top of the Ferris wheel, and she goes splat in a stand of flowers.
Like a Suicide Squad scene.
Yeah, it's kind of beautiful the way it happens, but she's also really super dead. Light falls in the water, and he survives. So then you tell us what happens at the very end. And Ryuk's just laughing the whole time.
He ends up in the hospital, so we find that out. And then, but before that, we get a scene with Elle. Elle has shown up at the crime scene. It's already happened. They take him to the hospital. Next day, Elle is being, like, bitched out by the Seattle Police Department. Like a bitch.
This internationally renowned detective.
Yeah, a guy that has, like, the world by the balls is just being, like, you sent us on a wild goose chase after this punk kid I better never see your face in town. You don't know what's gonna happen to you. Oh, shut up! You're fucking like.
And he goes and cries off to his limo.
You're the chief of police in Seattle. You're not special. This is so dumb. Elle is made to look like a bitch. He's escorted out by police into a taxi. And then his brain finally turns back on because Light said something about an encyclopedia, calculus book.
Calculus book.
Oh, it's some blah, 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 calculus book. And he's like, oh, calculus book? He didn't even take calculus. Which is, oh no. So he finally thinks, oh, he had an accomplice. Who would have guessed that this guy who had a girlfriend might have had an accomplice who was the girlfriend? And he goes and he searches the house and he finds the paper. And then we jump back and we see Light's in the hospital. He's like conked out. And someone, a dumbass, walks in and is just like,
lays the book on his chest.
Death Note, just right out in front where everybody can see it while he's asleep. He's not awake. They're not like, here, Kira, we brought you your book. They just slap it on his chest, and thank God he wakes up in time to go like, oh shit. And he sticks it behind his...
Tucks it behind his pillow.
I lost my pen. He sticks it behind his pillow like a child. That's the best he can come up with. He doesn't even like reach under and like put it underneath the mattress. He just sticks it behind the pillow. No one will find it there. Yeah. And then his dad walks in and is like, it was you. And he's like, yeah, it was me.
And then like a Bond villain, he tells in detail the whole story.
Then we get, the whole thing about the conditional, which didn't make sense. And see, what I did was I found out that this man who works at the hospital had a prior history, which I don't know how he's still working at the hospital if he had a prior history of...
assaulting his female patients.
Yeah, he's assaulting patients. I don't... Like, what kind of hospital was he working for? But, okay, so he pulls Light out of the water and resuscitates him, brings him back to life, which he was supposed to not die. Light specifically writes that Mia would drop his page into the flames, which I don't think you can write that many conditionals, but whatever.
So the page that said Light Turner's heart will stop is incinerated, and so that's the one thing.
This is how genius he is. He's so smart. He thought of all this. He writes that guy would... save him and then kill himself 2 days later after doing some other stuff. He writes that a pedophile would pick up the book from the... Knew this would happen. Somebody would call during the...
Somebody's calling... Oh, it's a fan calling us. Oh.
No, it's not. It's family. Anyway, so...
This is real life.
So a guy with a pedophile past finds the Death Note, and... I guess maybe he keeps writing in it for a couple of days before he brings it to Light, because it's mentioned that Light is in a coma and people are still dying, so that's why the Seattle police were bitching out Elle. And then that's the guy that drops it on his chest, it just in hopes nobody finds out. He goes and dies. And he's like, yeah, Dad, I picked the lesser of two evils.
So all of a sudden... Light, who is just this screamy, dopey, girl-hound teenager, all of a sudden is the genius that he was in the anime. All of a sudden at the very end.
By breaking all the rules of the book in the first place.
Yeah, and then...
Which is the only way you could write him smart again, because you weren't smart enough to write him well.
No, they just kind of crammed it all in at the end. And then Ryuk gets the last line. He's cackling in the shadows. Oh, humans are so interesting, which is something he said
from
in the anime. Yeah, so they're like, hey, you guys, you watch the anime. So, yeah, we totally...
And Elle had... Oh, we didn't mention that Elle, at this point, he finds the paper in that
Mia's
girl's
bedroom.
I guess... The parents aren't there. Maybe they're at the funeral.
Not. He breaks down the door and goes in.
He smashes it in like... I don't know how a guy that small would have smashed it in the way he did, but fine. And then he's like, just...
he's like crying and losing his mind.
And then he suddenly stops, and then it cuts away because they thought they were going to get a sequel. These dumbasses thought they were going to get a sequel where he he wrote down Light's name, and maybe Light would die because he was written in the Death Note, or maybe he couldn't die because he's been written in and then burned, and maybe they would add another rule to save him for the second movie or something.
Thank God there's no second movie. So this was, if you couldn't tell an hour ago, this was a pure hate watch.
It's such a hate watch.
Yeah, I didn't realize we'd be such weebs about it. But, and I mean, I don't even watch much anime, but I really love the original anime. So to our recommendations, of course, watch the anime. Now, okay, with a hate watch, there's a little bit of pleasure, especially if you have a partner in crime to bitch about it with. That can be kind of fun. And if you've seen the anime,
you appreciate it more.
It's kind of worth watching just to help you appreciate the anime more, and just to have a day. It's been a rough year. 2020 has been rough. 2021 has been rough. Sometimes you just want to bitch about stuff. So if you've seen the anime and you love it as much as we do, which probably everybody does, watch this movie and hate on it as much as you can, and then go back and watch the anime.
And then your mind will be blown that anyone could write all of this intrigue and confusion and twists and turns and,
it's amazing,
and tricking each other, and like okay, so this is where I'm sorry, I don't like bitching about people that are, they work in this industry and they try, but some of them aren't good. But whenever you're arrogant and you think, oh, we're gonna make our own version and it's gonna be darker than the original, and the original, it was cool but just didn't go far enough. Fuck you. Adam Wingard, you suck ass at everything. You are awful. You are fucking terrible. Now, apparently he has a credit for Godzilla versus Kong, which that might be a lot of fun. He's terrible. And that movie sounds like it's just made to be silly and ridiculous. I haven't seen it yet. So maybe that's a good thing. Do that. Do stupid things. Don't try to take an incredibly smart idea and tear it down. Here's what he could have done. He could have gone like, well, I want my version of Death Note. Okay. Set it past the original Death Note. Have it somehow... Ryuk got bored again, or maybe it's a different Shinigami. Pick a different one. You can make a whole new interesting character, one that is bloodthirsty, and have him drop it in America, and maybe it's a smaller story, because if you made it in the same world as the original Death Note, that would mean En is still out there, and En would totally track this guy down in a second, and probably beat him way quicker. So, make it a smaller story. I don't know, make it another genius high school student against kind of a stupid, well, sort of smart, but kind of dumb high school student.
We talked about reimagining in another podcast, and do a reimagining of this movie.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll do the recommendations other than the anime.
The anime, but I will say, if you've seen the anime, go ahead and watch this and have a good hate watch. If you haven't seen the anime, don't waste your time. There are plenty of other horror thrillers out there that are a lot better.
So there's a couple of thoughts that I'll leave, but we'll do the recommendations real quick. Mine is Jennifer's Body, which when I was a teenager and I saw it, I hated it. But we watched it recently, and it's actually really good. It has a very similar vibe, but it's funny, and it's aware of itself, and it's just a demonic sort of possession thing with a hot girl that kills guys, and it's very unexplainable. So, okay, fine. And it has this very similar aesthetic. It's not so gory that it's just gross, and but it is aggressive. So yeah, that's my recommendation.
Mine is going in a different direction. So if you want to see Willem Dafoe just cackling and making a young man's life miserable, watch The Lighthouse with amazing. Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson. It is so weird and awesome. You've got to watch it a couple of times to get it, but that is Willem Dafoe at his most cackling, crazy Willem Dafoe.
The first time we saw that was
ridiculous. Yeah.
So what?
So
what did we watch?
Just watch it a couple of times, and you'll get all the Willem Dafoe that you need that we didn't get in Netflix's Death Note.
So in response to my own bitching about the way this guy took this story, we have recently, this isn't a recommendation, although you should watch all of them. We've been recently watching all of the original Planet of the Apes films because I grew up on a few of them and I wanted Melanie to witness them because I think they're really good. That is kind of a ridiculous premise in its own way. It's not ridiculous. It's a very strange premise. And there are 5 films in the original series, and they're all really good. They're like too good, because every time someone got a handle on it, the director, the writers, everyone who acted in it, they tried as hard as they possibly could in every little detail, except for maybe the makeup a little while down the line. But every single time they're trying their heart out on this thing that shouldn't be able to run 5 movies in, but they do. So that's the opposite effect of what I feel like this one is. This guy barely tried. He just thought he was such an edgelord. He was gonna make this great version instead of like trying to what could be a really interesting new version of this story. Planet of the Apes didn't repeat itself, and it didn't dumb down in the sequels. They were just like, well, what if this happened? Okay, now, what if this happened? What would make this interesting story? Go with that. Go watch all those. Anyway, my last thought, this was just us being stupid. We started to recast some of the parts. Did we take any notes on like who we were gonna have?
Mm-mm.
Damn it.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I just think Roddy McDowall would have been a great L.
Yes, we're on a big Roddy McDowall kick with the Planet of the Apes movies. We love him. This man could emote with his eyes so much. He plays Cornelius originally, and then he plays his son Caesar. And he is incredible. So yeah, we were
especially
thinking,
with this mask up situation.
Yeah, so Roddy McDowall could probably be rest in peace. Roddy McDowall would bring him back, and he could be L.
And Peter Lorre could be his Watari.
And Peter Lorre could be his Watari from The Man Who Knew Too Much.
That's enough of our weirdness.
I don't think we picked a Mia or a Light. We couldn't think of any. I don't know who any of the young actors are these days.
Oh well, yeah, I did. But I don't know his name. The lead of Heartbeats.
Oh, yeah, that's a dance movie that takes place partially in India. Oh,
we will get to that.
Yeah, and then Irfan Khan, who is also dearly departed, should have been his father. So that would be our dream cast for Death Note. And so where can you find us? We have Instagram, Movie Pain or Pleasure Podcast, and that's where you can link to our podcast on Anchor and our YouTube page. We're also on Spotify and iTunes. And that's it for this week. AJ, anything else?
I got nothing.
Okay, he's got nothing.
Do your comments and likes and subscribe.
And tell us what movies you want us to watch.
I want numbers. No more of this just checking in bullshit.
Oh, okay.
Like, go and subscribe. And
got your marching orders. But tell us which
like
movies you want us to either watch as a guilty pleasure or just hate watch and destroy the way we did with Death Note. So we'll write it in our own Death Note. So anyway, thanks everybody. That's it for this week. Bye.